I know some Mexican stories from a place named La Rumorosa, as in the Whisperer. They are all from a book I bought when I was a kid, but I'll just translate some. The following stories are from Baja California, a Mexican state where a very famous place exists between the cities of Tijuana and Mexicali. Its name is La Rumorosa. This place is characterized by the countless rocks of all shapes and sizes swarming the hills. It is not uncommon to see the menacing silhouette of a creature or apparition spooking the townsfolk. These stories were submitted by townsfolk in a call named California's Voices that ranged from May to August from 1992 in the state of Baja California. The first story is called The Black Cat. How original. A couple of years ago, I am guessing around 1990 or 1989, in a town called Ensenada lived a girl with a fascination for cats. She loved them so much that every time she saw a homeless one she would shelter them in her house and feed them and yes, keep them. She loved cats and cats loved her. It happened one night that loud hitting on her window woke her up. She thought that maybe a neighbor needed something, but when she looked through the window she was amazed to find a black cat that looked at her with glowing eyes. She opened the window to let it in, which the cat thanked by purring, so she pet him for a while and went back to sleep. Several days went by and the black cat was the most affectionate of the bunch. It followed her everywhere, it even slept on her bed. However, the young woman noticed that the other cats became distant or even left the house. She could not understand why, and her sadness was overwhelming. Among her now dwindling cats, she loved one the most, a Siamese cat she raised since the cat was very small. Fearing that her beloved cat would decide to go away too, she decided to spend more time with her Siamese cat. So, one afternoon the young woman arrived from her job, and with great sadness noticed the two cats came to greet her. She picked up the Siamese cat, she hugged her and kissed her, but the black cat got angry. She was scared because the cat's eyes turned red and the hairs on its back stood up while it emitted the strangest growls that almost sounded like the screams of a person. The following night while she was giving her cat milk, the black cat came close and started to meow in an angry tone. Seeing this, the young woman tried to pick her Siamese cat up, but the black cat jumped on it and they fought viciously. Desperate from being unable to separate the cats, she ran to get a broom. When she came back she found the black cat licking the blood off its claws. Her cat was dead, so she started crying, and using the broom scared the black cat away from her house. For the following nights the black cat would come back and meow at the window, hoping to get in. Certain day that the young woman returned to her house she found the black cat inside, but this time the cat was bigger, very big. This scared her, so she tried to take him out, but it wouldn't budge. It would only stare into her eyes. Suddenly it pounced on her, scratching her and biting her. She tried to get free, scream, but the black cat wouldn't let her, cause it gripped its tail around her neck and squeezed until she stopped breathing. The black cat stayed for a while next to the body. It jumped out the window and disappeared in the midnight. No one would have known of the young woman's death if it wasn't because all the other cats had returned right after the black cat ran away, and after seeing that she didn't move they all started crying. Cats cry very loud. They cry of so many cats made people go check the house. Then they found the body. Okay, this other one is called La Salada, as in the salty plain. La Salada was a giant lagoon that dried a long time ago. Today the place is a desert of sand that glistens with the sun. The La Rumorosa goes through one of its shores, and the landscape is breathtaking. From the highest point it looks like a white spot that gets lost in the horizon. That is how Vicente saw it every day as he came down the road in his old passenger truck. He liked it very much because he remembers when it still had water. One afternoon he was doing his everyday route but with no passengers. He was going down the hill whistling a happy tune when a flock of screeching blackbirds came out of the sand in La Salada and started following him. He wouldn't have minded them, weren't countless more coming for him. The birds attacked the truck, leaving Vicente astonished, but he managed to stop in a curve. He couldn't believe that the birds were coming from beneath the sand. The birds stopped flying and just stood next to the truck until everything became a lagoon of black feathers. He made no move for several minutes but broke the calm by honking his klaxon, but the birds didn't move. An army flute sounded from afar. He looked above the birds and saw a dust cloud getting bigger. The sound of the flute was coming close, the same as the sound of galloping horses, yelling men, as if an army was crossing the Salada. The birds started flying everywhere, scaring Vicente so much he dropped to his knees and was very confused. After a few minutes, neither the army or the birds remained, as if it was all a bad dream. He tried to recover from the fright, and when he was calm again he took the wheel and started the engine to keep on his way, but his eyes gazed upon something unknown. A giant winged beast was heading towards the truck. The next day some men passing through there found the salty corpse of Vicente hardly gripping the wheel. La Rumorosa. Some people say that on the ranch near Tijuana lived a nurse named Eva. She was very well known and respected because she would always help people regardless of the time. These were the times in which doctors came to see you instead of the other way around. One day a distressed old lady was begging her, "Please Eva, come see my husband, he needs attention. Come see him, please." The husband had great stomach pains. He complained all night. This woman lived near La Rumorosa, which was far away from Eva's house. Eva told her that once she was done with another patient she would go. The woman told her how to get to her house and left. So the nurse went to check on her neighbor and then headed off to La Rumorosa under the scorching sun, but in her haste to arrive she took a wrong turn. She couldn't see any house and she got worried. Several hours passed since she came out of her house and it would get dark pretty soon. She was hungry and thirsty, but she tried not to panic. She looked around and saw nothing but rocks making the countless hills of La Rumorosa. A sense of dread invaded her cause she knew stories about that place which talked about apparitions, witches and who knows what else. She decided to keep on walking and holding her fear went through those hills. With the night the enormous rocks scattered everywhere transformed into horrid people and animals that yelled her name, Eva, Eva. The woman ran desperate between the rocks until her feet slipped and she died. With the passing days people came looking for Eva to her house, but she wasn't to be found. No one ever knew anything about her until one day on the curves of the road of La Rumorosa a woman dressing white was sighted asking for a ride. The road is so difficult no one could stop, but still when least expected she would show up in the co-pilot seat. She would remain silent the whole ride and always disappeared after the graveyard. Some people were so scared they wouldn't want to go back the same road in fear of the dead nurse. Others, however, tell about a ghostly apparition that treats patients when they are alone. She would treat the curations with delicate hands and always disappeared when the real nurse came to the room. A lot were scared of the nurse disappearing right in front of their eyes, but all say they were favored by the spirit. A lot of townsfolk went to talk to the priest to find help for the nurse, but since no one knows where she died nothing has been able to be done. This way the dead nurse will keep haunting the roads of La Rumorosa for the years to come. Okay, I'm back you guys. This next story is called The Chains in the Well. Ticket is a small town at the end of the Rumorosa Desert. In the times of the revolution, around 1910, a marriage lived without children, peaceful and working people. The wife took care of the house while the husband labored the earth. Around those times there were not that much people and the roads were dry lines on the dirt. Dust would come up and blind anyone who passed by. One day, a couple of men were very thirsty cause they had been walking several hours under the scorching sun. When they saw the hard-working man they approached him. After greeting the men the hard-working man asked them what brought them to the lands. The pair of men said they wanted to have a good fortune so they were heading to Tijuana, through the Rumorosa. They still had a long way to go. They were thirsty and asked the man for some water. The man had just drank the last drops of water, but he led them to his house so he could give them some from his well. The man was excited as he wasn't used to get a lot of visitors, so he would always ask a lot of questions from other places. So trusting them, he showed them his wife, which the men greeted by taking their hats off. The men drank as much water as they could, they ate like they hadn't eaten in days, and gave good conversation. The afternoon was giving its way to the night. Coyotes howled to the first rays of the moon. Those men gave no signs of wanting to leave, they seemed so pleased, so husband and wife showed them where to sleep. Later that night a scream was heard echoing far away. No one knows what happened for sure, but the tale goes that the strangers planned to steal as little as the husband had, and as he fought back the strangers tied him up with a chain and then threw him in as well. Only the moon knows what happened that night. As for the wife and a couple of guys, nothing was ever known again. Ever since, some nights loud noises can be heard coming from the well. Anyone who's heard it says that the dead man manages to come out of the well, dragging his chain while he cries in great sadness. They say he is searching for his wife and the heartless guys who killed him. People who goes through very early in the morning say they can see the wet footprints of the chained feet. The headless rider. This is the longest one. Carmelo was an old man who lived in a farm in Mexico's valley. He would plant according the season, cotton or corn. He took very good care of his harvest and woke up really early to water the plants. One day around 4 in the morning he could hear a horse's gallop, which weirded him out. He greeted still. The lack of response made him turn around, and what was his surprise to find no one there, even though his dog wouldn't stop barking. He never believed in the supernatural, but fear took over him. He tried to calm down and went home and spent the day uneasy. During lunchtime he told his wife what had happened, but she didn't believe him. The days went by and nothing out of this world was heard in the farm. But one Monday very early the old man went out with his dog, and when he went in his truck he noticed he forgot his snacks, so he returned home, but a crazy galloping horse stopped him in his tracks. Because the animal moved without touching the ground and headed right towards him, when it was about to run over him it disappeared. Astonished, he couldn't move for a while. Still shaking, he entered his home and fell asleep. He was woken up by his wife for lunch. He told her about the horse apparition. The wife was frightened by the story and started to pray and didn't want her husband to go outside. The man didn't listen and headed outside anyways. When he arrived to the farm he stood under a big tree. The last rays of light were going up the sky when he heard the stomping of a horse behind him. When he turned back he saw a big white horse in front of him. A charro-dressed rider left the old man trembling with fear, cause the rider lagged ahead. The man asked the ghost what he wanted, but there was no response, only the sound of the wind blowing through the tree's branches. He heard a deep voice that came from the earth. It was both hollow and ominous. "I am Joaquin Murrieta, you must have heard of me. I come to confide you a secret, listen closely what I'm about to tell you. In this farm I buried a magnificent treasure and I want to give it to you, but in one condition only." "What?" said the man. "You can only dig it up. No one, absolutely no one else can do it, because anyone who attempts it will fall into their deaths as a rain from heaven, and you with him." The voice began to fade. In a blink of an eye the headless man vanished. The man recovered from the encounter and went to town in his truck and headed to town. He was so excited he told everyone about it. So he bought what he needed and went for it, but not alone. A group of men was accompanying him. He didn't care they destroyed the harvest, because they were all making holes in the farm, and after a couple of hours, one of them screamed he got something. They all headed over there with faces of contempt. They found big bags full of coins, chains, rings, and other objects of gold and silver. They all jumped and yelled, but that didn't last long. A headless rider on a white horse appeared upon them. The old man remembered then about the threat Joaquin Murrieta made. It was however too late. The headless rider gave a command to his horse. This in return killed the earth and the treasure started to sing, taking all of the people between screams of terror and anguish. The old man begged him not to do this, that he was to punish and only him, but it was useless. In a matter of seconds there was no one left, only the old man and the rider, who disappeared without saying a word. The old man returned home. He told nothing to his wife, he just stood under the entrance and he moved no more. Days went by and the old man ate no more and he was drying up until he died. No one else knows what happened. It's said that Joaquin Merida still hunts this lands in the search of someone to give his treasure. Okay, this is my favorite of the bunch. La Señora del Cinco, the 5 cents lady. Many years ago, when the city of Mexicali wasn't so big and everyone knew each other, there lived a lady that treated her 2 sons in a very bad way. She would spend a lot of time yelling at them and she had them locked up most of the time. With the passing of time the boys grew up, turned into men and found a wife for themselves. This way, the lady became lonely and her conscience began to bother her. She remorsed the way she treated her kids. Because she couldn't find peace, one afternoon she went to see the priest. She told the priest everything she did and the priest listened. When she was done the priest told her in a serious tone, "Your sins are many inverted question mark. How is it possible you treated you kids in such a way? To save your soul, you have to make a trip to Rome as soon as possible, only there will you find the forgiveness you need." She was very poor and lonely and had nothing or anyone to help her. "If that is so," said the priest, "to gather the money, you will have to beg, but you will only receive 5-cent coins. When you get other denomination of coins you will return them." And so she did. She went right outside the church and begged the first guy she saw. "May I have a 5? She always would forever ask. The man had none but he handed 20 cents. "No thanks," she replied, "I only want a 5. She then returned the coin. The man got confused and thought she was being rude. He then left offended. After some time the people started calling her La Señora del Cinco. She was always outside the church in a humble attitude and decided to fulfill her promise, did not mind rain or intense heat. So many months of effort broke her health, so when she was near her goal she got gravely ill and died. One night of so many, the dogs started to bark with no reason, a cold wind blew through windows and doors, and a lady dressed in black shrouded by a veil, roamed the lonely streets. "Sir, may I have a 5? She would ask. "I don't have any, miss, but you can have 10 cents. In that moment the wind would blow the veil away and reveal the skull that was her face. The apparition became famous in a short amount of time, so everybody started to have 5 cents with them, while others just didn't come out at night anymore in fear of the skull that would be their parents' demise. So my sister is telling me that I have no life for doing this. Maybe that is true anyways." This next story is called The Witch Stones. Near the Ensenada, along the shore, there's a place known as Tidal of La Zora, where 7 different roads converge in a bunch of stones that, as the locals say, are good or bad according to the person going through there. One day a young lad named Philippe, who strolled through life sussing it out. He did not like to walk, or cold, or heat, anyways he was never happy. His mother sent him to the coast to bring shrimps because it was season. He was about to leave when he said, "Philippe, don't you forget that you have to cut a branch to leave at the stones." The young sassball didn't reply, took his basket and left. So long story short, this is a very boring story. The kid forgets the branch, and then he is a greedy bitch trying to get more shrimps even though they are in the danger zone. So he is about to get them shrimps when a giant wave comes from behind and takes him away while he is being a prick, and the kid was never to be seen. Some days later they found the basket of the little boy but no more. The Duendes from Las Palomas Ranch. In the Las Palomas Ranch lived a family, father, mother and 2 girls. It was getting late and Mother Chana was making some chocolate for dinner. Suddenly, around 6 in the afternoon, a bunch of stones started to rain down everywhere. The girls rushed into the house while the father stayed outside. He covered his head. He looked around everywhere. He noticed a bunch of tiny hands moving about near a very old tree. He came closer but was hit right in the eye and made him return into the house. After telling his wife about the duendes, she said that no one came against them duendes. The girls listened to their parents argue about the whole deal and looked outside. The stones stopped from falling, and everyone went outside and saw the place covered by stones and a bunch of neighbors talking about what happened. When the father and mother went to talk to the neighbors about the duendes, the father saw the little girls ventured and grabbed a couple of the stones. But when they approached the tree, they found little footprints that went inside the old tree. Both girls peeked inside, but when they looked they felt as if something dragged them inside, and they heard a bunch of laughs, so they ran away in fright. Since then, every day at 6 in the afternoon, no one goes outside in Las Palomas Ranch, cause thoughts the hour the duendes go out and make mischief, like making a rain of stones. Okay, here is the last one I have before I go. I want to call out to any Mexibro out here and contribute to this thread. Let's all join our forces into a giant genkidama that destroys Enrique Peña Nieto once and for all. Anyways, the last story is called The Trucker from the Road. A long time ago, on the road of La Rumorosa, a truck driver drove by at full speed towards Mexicali, cause his wife was about to give birth and he wanted to be in his house as soon as possible. And because he was carrying money for her. But when he was turning in a dangerous curve, he lost control and crashed on some rocks. He saw nothing had happened to him, and so he waited for someone to help him. But no one crossed those hills in a long time, so he fell asleep, and when he woke up he saw that everything was dark, and he decided to walk since the exit wasn't so far. But he walked and returned to the same crash site. 3 days later they found the truck but no driver. No one knew anything about it until 5 years later a driver picked up a hitchhiker. He needed to get the money to Mexicali for his wife to have. He couldn't come with since his truck was busted and he couldn't leave it here. The driver accepted and received directions to the wife's house and shook his hand, but when he did he felt goosebumps and cold sweat. It was like holding a dead person's hand. So the driver headed to Mexicali and went to the address, but the wife lived there no more, so he asked in several places and an old lady told him the wife's new address and he went. So he gave the money and told his story to the wife, which she listened to amazed. Her husband had died 5 years ago. The driver shit his pants and left the money with her and returned home scared. As soon as he opened his door, he heard the voice of the ghost trucker. "Gracias amigo," it said while fading away. Sometime later the driver learned that the same thing happened before to other people, and when they didn't complete the task they would dry up until they looked like skeletons. And that is the end, ungrateful ignorant bros. I hope I can at least entertain someone with these stories. This is Mexibro signing out.
Thank you for subscribing to Midnight Broadcast. More green text from XR Farming, a new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight at Central Time.